Andrew, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to spend some time talking about Samplers Inc. and all that you are doing. We'll talk about activation and how samplers can support brands, but also just insights you have, whether a company connects with yours or not. And before we started recording, we were talking about the videos that you all are doing. Right, your team has done some really great teaser videos, as they were talking about, but you were talking about some of your core values and other aspects of what makes samplers samplers. I even think that part will be interesting for people because we're talking about activation. We're talking about bringing awareness to brands, and you all do that for others in demos and sampling and people tasting and trying products and learning about them. But you're also bringing that activation to samplers. I was sharing before we started recording that you all are doing a really good job. So anyone listening to this or watching it, watch Andrew's, because we were just discussing lighting in the videos. It's very, very well done. You will see the difference between Andrew's production team at Samplers and Bryan's production team, which you're looking at right here at VP Solution. So Andrew, tell us a little bit about samplers. And if you don't mind, share a bit what you're doing now, just bringing awareness to samplers beyond what you've already done and been doing.
Sure. Thanks, obviously, for having me on. You and I have been friends for quite a while, and
Yes, sir.
we've used each other as a resource. And, a lot of it, even when I looked at some of your videos that you do where you talk about being intentional, right? Samplers has been around for probably close to 30 years at this point. And we recognize that, yeah, we do sampling and we do activations, but to a lot of the general public, they don't even know we exist because we have to portray that we're part of the brands that we represent or the retailers that we partner with, right? So how do we, from an intentional perspective, go out to market to let people know that we're there? And it's all about the marketing mix. And I say that to my customers all the time, right? Yeah, demos is one piece of what you're doing, but it has to be coupled with different ways of trying to meet customers where they're at. And we kind of had to take our own advice and go out there and try and, set time aside in our busy schedules to have a leadership discussion and incorporate, somebody from every department at every level to sit there and say, what are we going to try and get across? What do we want to communicate about who we are? Some of it's about the nuts and bolts of how sampling and activation works. But the other part of it is just who we are as a culture, who we are as a company. What do we stand for? Like, we're not saving babies. I get that. But we're about people. We're about accountability. What are our pillars? And having that discussion in advance, so then we could sort of formulate the content around it. Yeah. So it was coherent and digestible to the general public, no matter where they were in the process of trying to understand who we were.
That's, you said many things that I think are really important, and some it's worth underscoring. So there's some similarities in what we, both of our businesses do. You mentioned when your team is out in the field working on behalf of one of your clients, they see the brand. That brand might be the retailer. If you're doing something specific for the retailer, some sort of activation for them, their own brand, or if it's one of your clients. And we at VP Solutions, I do the same thing. When I'm working here, I'll wear my shirt and it says but if I'm in a trade show, when I was there, when you and I were talking to Clark and Steve from Buttermints, I work as the Buttermints guy, right? I work there reporting into Steve. Steve is their VP of sales. He reports into Clark. When I'm working with Optionits, I have their email. So when I'm talking kosher meat snacks, that's who people see. So same for you and your team, right? When you're doing, and I love following you on LinkedIn, and I'm old, so I use Facebook. I do have Instagram, but I see it on Facebook. Your team is in a variety of places. It might be Target. It might be a chain of liquor stores doing just this wide variety of things. And when I see the team out there, they're reflecting those brands. So it does make sense that you take extra time to share the internal things, and that's where you're bringing that awareness on LinkedIn, the B2B side of things, and that's fantastic. And you said something else that I think is important. You spoke with people at various roles on your team, right? You're having various team members engage in advance, and you're engaging them in the videos. You're making them really part of the process, or bringing it to the forefront, I should say, right? People on the outside can see what you and Darren and the rest of the team do on a regular basis. And I think that's very helpful for, again, especially in LinkedIn, where probably a lot of this will end up landing, or YouTube, the B2B side of things, where they say, oh, yeah, one of the reasons samplers is so effective with me as a client is because Andrew and the team there are very effective on the inside with each other. So you said the brand's been around for almost 30 years. So we've been doing this about the same amount of time. And that's something that uh, is easy to overlook. And that means the different people on your team bring their experience. Some of them have probably been there a long time. But tell us about that, because there are some things that brand can seem like an overnight success. You're like, no, we've been doing this for a very long time. So tell us a bit about that, and also remind us. I recall from talking to you, your team can help brands on a regional level, sort of smaller scale, but also, again, we mentioned Buttermints. I believe you're probably talking to Clark right now, because Buttermints is getting ready to launch in Sprouts Innovation Center. We've been talking about doing activation demo sampling at a number of Sprouts events. So if someone was launching at Sprouts, and if they were launching at Whole Foods at the same time, or a Target, you all can go from a regional activation to national. So take some time to explain, the length of time you've been in business. I think that plays into your ability to do these different things, from small scale activation to significant amount of retail doors, all in a very short time.
Sure. So I think sort of setting the table is sort of looking at things from a timeline perspective. Before we were Samplers, which is a W-2 nationwide agency with thousands of employees, right? Prior to Samplers being that W-2 agency, we were known as Big Orange out in the marketplace.
Right, I remember.
And Big Orange was a 1099 agency. People who worked for us were independent contractors. Gave more flexibility. There were some efficiencies there, but with labor laws and compliance and things like that, sort of the labor market changed and we had to adapt to that. And there was this random thing called COVID that happened that sort of helped expedite that process.
Right.
I don't know if you've heard of that before, but, kind of impacted the food business, especially, yes, and the liquor business in a really good way.
That's right. People can get it delivered to their house now.
Yeah. And, Big Orange was created because our owner was sort of a starving actor in Boston. And one of his friends worked for a beer distributor. And they actually staged bar fights in Boston bars, which is fairly appropriate for Boston if you're
That's awesome.
Familiar, right? But he had to figure out a name, and he Big Orange Productions, So this was brought to you by Heart Beer and Big Orange Productions. That was sort of how it all started. And we started out as sort of a small regional agency. And then around the time that I came on board, probably 2011-ish, end of 2011, beginning of 2012, it's funny because Chris and Samantha were people who started at Big Orange right out of college, but we all went to college together.
Oh, cool.
So during that time, in the infancy of my sales career, I was in the tech space. I stayed in touch with Samantha and Chris because we were great friends from college. We'd bounce ideas off each other about business and life and just kids and starting families, the whole works, right? And every now and then sort of consult back and forth about what we were doing. And then finally they said, hey, have you ever thought about, potentially changing? And it was perfect because I was just starting my family, and my wife was kind of like, you don't really like tech, and they sound kind of fun, and you could learn about something new. And she's like, if we're going to get married, like, go, now's the time to do it if you're going to make the change. And I mean, talk about a great opportunity to sort of make a change, because it's fun and it's something that you can really enjoy because you're learning about all these different types of brands, and you get to see all the successes that happen and learn from the failures, obviously, too, of what happens. But At that time, one of the things that we did is we partnered with other agencies who do what we did. And we
Okay.
would take all of the really tough to activate
Nice.
stores and they would sub that stuff out to us. But
Nice.
what was cool about it was we were getting all of the hard to reach areas from everybody. So we were able to give continuity of work to all these brand ambassadors in Omaha, Nebraska and
Okay.
McKinney, Texas, and some of the more harder to reach areas where you wouldn't
Right.
expect continuity from a brand ambassador perspective. And that helped us grow from sort of that small regional agency to a nationwide agency.
Yeah,
And then,
sorry to
go
interrupt,
ahead.
but I think that's worth underscoring too, right? You all found a need and you filled it, right? The areas that instead of going, and maybe it's clearly obvious to you, but I think others might, we can learn from that regardless of what kind of brand we represent, whether it's CPG or a service. You said, okay, we could go head to head with all those established companies in their markets, or we could complement them and we'll take the difficult to activate areas. So you started with the most difficult things to accomplish, the smaller towns, the out of the way places, the ones that were harder. And from that, you built, like you said, continuity. You were allowing those brands to reach all the markets they wanted to because you did it clearly well. You adapted very quickly. It sounds like, or over time you adapted. And then you were able to keep your team engaged because, right, those either the agency or agencies that you had partnered with could keep giving you all work. So that's very wise. So way to
Well,
go.
the craziest part of it all is that we've been able to keep those relationships with
Yeah.
other agencies even
Okay.
still today
Wow.
and still drive our own path.
See, that's
So we are able to keep those covenants and we take it very seriously, right? So
right.
if an agency partners with us, there's a wall that happens there where even if the customer sort of reaches out to us and says, "Hey,
Mhm.
we heard you're doing good things in Sam's Club. We'd like to engage you in this RFP. Sorry, we have contractual covenants. We have to
Right.
respectfully decline." And we keep those covenants because if we didn't, well, one, it's not the right thing to do. So
Right.
that's not who we are as individuals. But secondarily, it would have ruined our business long ago, right?
Yeah, it's an abundance. Stephen Covey called that an abundance mentality, because I know from just our interaction over the years that you do have good relationships with competing agencies, and I remember reaching out to introduce one to you, and I had worked with that agency in the past, and I was very surprised when I sent the email introduction and he reached back out and said, Bryan, I have no interest. Not because he knew you and didn't care for Andrew or anyone on your team. He said, I don't work with competing. It's like, wow. I was like, Andrew, I had known you, so I knew that you would have that separation. But it was very interesting because your approach is an abundance mentality, right? Like we can do more if we work together that individuals and they're successful in their own right in a fairly large organization, but it was just so interesting. There is a very distinct management leadership philosophy that you and your team have. It sounds clearly the founders and you all have aligned very well with that. You found partners where not only for the brands themselves but competing agencies to complement one another. And again, that's something that people that do the kinds of things I do, sales, fractional sales management, they're doing some sort of service as well, like you all do. It's a unique opportunity because many people, it's very easy to have a scarcity mentality, like the pie is fixed. And if I try to align with Andrew, I'll earn less instead of thinking, whoa, if Bryan and Andrew work together, it won't be 1+1 = 2. It'll probably be 1+1 = 3 or 4 or 5 because of the synergy and the complementation. I think I just made up a word, how we complement each other. But it's worth underscoring that you all have done that and that you mentioned that it's been an ongoing piece. It wasn't just something you did early on and then you separated out and but you're still doing that. So that's fantastic.
And I have to give credit where credit is due. A lot of that had to do with my first day of work. I went to a conference on my first day of work.
Nice.
And it was the National Association of Retail Merchandisers,
Hmm.
which turned into World Alliance for Retail Excellence, and now it's part of Shop, right? So generally merchandisers, but there's demo companies there as well, and there's marketing activation companies, that type of thing, and as well as retailers and brands and all of that. And I got off the plane and met with, the now current CEO of Channel Partners, Jim Fall, or formerly of SRS, Steve Workman, right? These two guys, salt of the earth human beings that, like, I was so green. To give you an idea, I thought big brands ruled the world. Like, I had no idea how much power retailers had
Okay.
at
Yeah.
that very moment when I walked off the plane in Scottsdale, right? So I'm just sitting there like, and people are like, oh, who are you with? Oh, I'm with Big Orange. Oh, yeah, Samantha, Chris, we love those guys. And they were like, how long you been in the business? And I'm like, full transparency, like today's my first day. And they were like, oh, come with us. Like, and it's one of
Nice.
those scenarios where even today, I call a lot of these guys to sit there and say, hey, here's the problem I'm having. Ron Appel, he runs a demo company in Ontario, Canada, Excel Sales and Merchandising. The amount of times that him and I have had conversations back and forth, but a lot of the conversations in the beginning were him consulting for me just to
Nice.
give me a lay of the land of the business because I didn't understand it. And without that, I don't think I would have made it 6 months in this business, right?
That's
So
yeah.
that's
That
what created the collaboration with those companies because they were like, okay, I trust you. We know you're good people and we know that you have a competent team.
right.
And there was this comfort in that organization that allowed for us to be able to partner where it made sense. But then there's also a time where we sit there and say, okay, we've grown to a certain spot. There are opportunities that do not sort of conflict with those covenants. And let's go out. We've sort of earned the right.
Nice. Well, I remember you've introduced me to at an event to Ron, and I think we had dinner together, a group of folks, and he is that guy that seems very encouraging. But that's it's those moments where you connect with other people who are like that they want to help. They too, right? They had that abundance mentality of, hey, I'm happy to show you things, right? This industry, they clearly like the industry they were in. They had the idea, the approach that I can help you, and if I'm generous to you, in some way it will come back. I want you to understand our industry. I want you to be successful, and you built the relationship going from pretty much learning now to collaborating and helping each other, still helping each other solve problems. And that's again, it's pretty great. And that's goes back to all the years your team had been in business before you came on board, the work you've done. And I have a feeling that there are probably a handful of folks, maybe more, that are on your team that have been there now a while as well as it grew, where you bring on people and their experience then helps add to the whole success of samplers.
Yeah. And, it kind of comes to if you really break it down, we spend more waking hours with the people that we work with sometimes than our own family.
Very true.
And, you know, would it be nice to be in a more like an industry where you could help people more directly? Sure. But this is the industry we're in. You got to lean into it and you got to find the reasons. And if you can help other people earn a living,
Right.
create their dreams, go and do what needs to be done, like there's value in that. And you can look at it from different
Yeah.
aspects. From a talent perspective, we're giving people extra opportunities to go out there and earn,
Right.
develop in their career, and hopefully maybe get into a sales career. As a stepping stone, they could use that as a launch point from a
Yes.
new brand perspective to be able to grow that brand and either exit or merge with another company. How great is that? How many times have you exited out somebody that, they outgrew needing a fractional
Right.
salesperson?
Yeah.
Most
Help
people
them
would be
grow.
like, oh, I lost an account.
Right. But
I'm
you
not
want to help them
speaking
grow.
for you, but
Right.
I can imagine that you're like, no, that's my measure of success.
Right. Yeah.
So
And so that no, that's exactly right. And helping people thrive and grow professionally, I think is very important. I think we're all here to help. engage with others. You work well with many retailers that you might have an exclusive or one of two or three, a couple companies that are able to do product demonstrations and the different things you do. And your experience, you can really help brands navigate issues with retail. So that's one of the things that's can maybe another startup demo company uh, may not have the experience or the knowledge of those retailers. So you can provide a level of consulting, if you will, guidance to brands, not only for just, hey, this activation will be successful when you want to do 200 demos at Sprouts or 400, you want to do one at each store, the ability to do that, but to guide them through challenges they may not have thought about, uh, and help them in ways that is beyond just the typical support for that particular event. And that's, I think those are things too, especially whether the brand is a very high dollar brand, they're 100 million or some more, they've got more numbers in their annual revenue, or they're a smaller brand and growing. Either way, having someone and a team that can help them overcome issues that they didn't even know existed. That's hard to put a dollar amount on when you say, well, when you compare us to the others, we're pretty close in price. That other piece, though, that's hard to say, well, there's this extra value in there that if you can guide someone around a landmine, so to speak, that might be the difference between success or failure in that event or with that next retailer. You help them prepare. I'm sure that happens many times, but I know that you have established relationships with a variety of retailers. Maybe share a bit about how that those relationships you have, your experience in those places can help a brand just be again, there's always things we don't know that we don't know, the unknown unknown. And you all have some experience with that.
I think probably the biggest trend that I see that brands need to be cognizant of is it's not just nationwide retailers that are having media groups sort of control trade spend,
Mhm.
right? And you got to be intentional about it, going back
Right,
to the intentional piece, because the retailers have to spend money in ways that benefit the retailer, but it's being funded by the brands, is essentially what it comes down to.
right,
So really, really being able to put a business plan together that's coherent, that can sometimes change the trajectory of the way that money's being spent, depending on where the brand is from a life cycle perspective. And what I mean by that is, they may be pushing you to do ads or end caps or whatever in the marketing mix, right?
right.
But you're a new brand. Nobody knows that you're there. End caps probably a really good opportunity, but is an ad going to have the same
Right.
effect as potentially doing a demo where people can actually taste it? They can
Yes.
have somebody answer questions about the ingredients, the packaging, the
Right.
taste, the story of the brand, whatever it
Right.
might be. So I think it's incumbent on the brands to be able to sit there and make a business case. Because if you don't prepare in advance,
Right.
you're going to be told this is how we're going to spend that money.
Absolutely.
And it's not the retailer's fault. They have certain metrics
Right.
that the buyers need to hit. So I'm not dogging on the
Correct.
retailers. If anything, I'm talking about the preparation on the brand side,
Right.
and that's why you can be so valuable because you can sort of foresee that, and instead of being reactive, you can be proactive.
Right. And I think that makes good sense because the retailer, if a brand goes in and says, hey, retailer X, how can we be successful? And they say, oh, yeah, if you can afford the end cap and the ad makes awareness for the end cap. People come in, they see it, they buy it. And often that's the case, right?
Mhm.
That being said, you're correct. For a brand that has vast exposure, has already been in someone's pantry, that was probably the most appropriate use of their resources. And we talked about, we'll use Buttermints as an example. Buttermints is a brand that if someone tries, they love it. When we were at Sweets and Snacks, there were so many people like, oh, the nostalgia. Like, they would come through like, and I didn't realize how many people's grandmothers made this stuff. Mine did. Mine made other things, fudge and different things, but not Buttermints. And people say, oh, my grandmother made it. It reminds me of being a kid, or just have these wonderful memories. And I will tell you, when they try it, no one asked about the price. The retailers weren't asking about the price. Like at a trade show, they always ask about price. You're like, whoa, this was amazing. Consumers do the exact same thing with that product, right? So in Sprouts, yes, one of the most expensive, one of the most valuable investments the brand will be making is trial, because we know that if someone will just taste a couple of things why I'm that the nostalgia, like, wow, it reminds me of some happy memory as a kid, or it could be
Yeah.
their wedding, or something really unique, or they'll go, this is the most amazing thing. It's not exactly what I expected. And they don't even ask about the cost. Like, okay, I'll take some. I want two or three flavors because, well, I like them, and I'm going to this place this weekend, or I'm going to take them to the office, or whatever the case may be. And that just trial there is great. And you mentioned also the education. Then the team there can say, well, yeah, it's Clark's grandmother's recipe, and he tweaked it. And there's, they have 5 flavors at Sprouts, but there's 24 flavors online, like 24 flavors. So yes, that experiential event makes such a difference for so many brands. And to your example about the end cap, so for brands that do, if you're a newer brand and you get that end cap exposure at a Sprouts, a Whole Foods, a Target, wherever it may be, the right activation where someone can taste and try your product, especially if it's one of those that's fairly universal and like it crosses many, demographics, it's a fantastic opportunity, and it can really be a real difference between that same amount of money that would have went into the demos, if you put it into something else, would not generate the return. So those are important things.
And classify. So, two things I would add sort of to the preparation, right?
Mhm.
One of the things that we recognize as companies get bigger and bigger, circle back every now and then, have a meeting, even if it's once a year, to sit there and say, what is the story of our brand? What is our differentiator? What makes us different? Are we a premium brand or are we a value brand? Where are we positioned? And how can we speak positively about our brand where you don't even have to talk negatively about your competing brands?
Right.
And those are your selling points. And when you go to Expo West, or you go to Fancy Food, or you go to a tabletop show, what are the common objections that you get, even if they don't make sense, right?
Right.
There used
Right.
to be a relaxation drink, but it was in the same can as a Red Bull that we
Oh,
used to do tastings for. And people would automatically look at it and say, sorry, I don't do energy drinks. It was actually
right.
a relaxation drink, but it was canned in a certain
Right.
way.
It's the association with that slim can.
Right. So I pounded into their head, if you're not going to change the packaging, what do we need to say that will respectfully overcome those objections, educate the consumer, and give us the opportunity to ask for the sale at
That's
retail?
Well, that's really wise. So do that annually. That makes sense, because it'd probably be easy to just assume everybody on the team knows. You probably, tell me if this is accurate, if someone does that on an annual basis, they might find one new objection that maybe they didn't have before, or wasn't they were aware of. Maybe one of them disappears. Just
Even
so
if it's
that
something new. If you find something new, that's a bonus over and above. But one of the things that I realize is, and I do this with my team about sort of our onboarding process and setting
okay,
good expectations
nice,
about what to expect from a sales lift, a sustained sales lift, making sure that we're hitting the metrics for training and things like that. Sometimes you get into such a routine and you take for granted, because we're in an industry that uses acronyms all the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Sometimes you don't realize that somebody might be coming from private equity and coming into the CPG business. We see that a lot. They don't know what all these acronyms mean.
or they have the same letters but different meanings, right? They might have the same has a whole different meaning.
It's sometimes good to ground yourself and go back to the basics, because there was a time probably about 4 years ago where I had a lull in sales where I just couldn't sell anything. And a lot of time I was getting too technical in my own brain. And I almost brought myself back to a very simplistic, almost like when I first started in the
Hmm.
business, of really walking people through. You actually had a really good clip on LinkedIn where you were talking about sort of getting back to the basics and um, kind of
Like
give me a
our
little more on
checklist, like our
yeah, the
checklist of here's the
checklist.
things we walk people through, right?
If you try and skip any of these steps, right?
There's some process, the steps you go through, and if you skip them too quick, if you skip more than two, then the relationship gets damaged. It was actually based on a relationship book, I think something like 12 steps in a relationship between sort of you see your future spouse to the consummation of your marriage. Like if you've got to go through these steps in order, and if you skip a couple, it can throw things off. You can't go from you saw your bride and you walk up to her and say, "Hey, I'm Andrew. Would you like to have a couple children?" And she's like, "No, no, no. There's a process. There's a process, and if you those steps, you now you have a lovely bride and children, but right, if you skip those steps, it throws things off. You probably won't have a lovely bride and children."
Right. So it's the same thing in retail, right? And it's in every aspect of retail. So even for us, it was, hey, hold on a minute. Let's slow the process down and we've said the word probably 10 times already. Let's be very intentional about what we're trying to accomplish. Something as simple as making sure that whoever you partner with, whether it's a demo company, whether it's a merchandising company, whether it's a fractional salesperson, that they understand all aspects of your business in a way where if somebody was having a conversation with them, you wouldn't realize that they were a partner, not a full-time employee or a stakeholder in that company
That's
in
good.
a more deeper level.
Yeah, they seem to be part of the team, right? Someone wouldn't know, and that's great for any of us, right? In the space of where we're partnering with a brand or service company. Yes, so the person interacting with us doesn't know we're sort of 1099ers, right? We seem to be part of that team. There's a lot of wisdom there. Excellent.
It's the only way that you can do this at scale,
Right.
right? And really, the last thing I think is there are two different reasons to do demos usually. One is to sell product. That's the most common sense one,
Right.
right? The other one, well, there's more than two, but there's two main ones. The other one is to make your buyers happy because they're trying to fill a bucket,
Right.
right? They have certain metrics that they need to hit, and it's sort of communicating what that goal is
Right.
up front to somebody that you're going to choose activations with, whether it's myself or some other company, doesn't
Right.
matter, right? And because if it's just to make a buyer happy, it helps to know that from a planning perspective.
Right.
But if you're truly looking at it as a sales strategy, a marketing strategy, exposure strategy, doing one-off demos, instead of doing 50 stores in a chain
Mm-hmm.
once, do 15 stores 3 times.
And I think I know the answer to that. But why would that be important? Because it sounds like that could either way, whether it's for sales or making that the buyer happy. But that slight difference between the 50 demos in one demo in 50 stores and about 3 demos 15 stores. Why would that be important for the brand to do the 3 demos in 15 stores? Why
Yeah.
should they go that route?
One of the research projects that I did early on in the process was trying to figure out how many times does somebody need to buy a product and see a product um, to have it be the regular product in their shopping basket,
Mm-hmm.
and it's around 3, right? Sometimes it's a little more. It generally depends on the price. I won't get into the weeds on that, but generally speaking, if somebody buys it 3 times,
Okay.
it's going to turn into the English muffins that people are going to buy on a
Well,
regular
that's
basis.
important. Well, and again, I appreciate that's a real value added thing. So for people listening, like, okay, Andrew's provided some wisdom there that whoever you're using, so that would then allow that brand to probably both make the buyer happy, right? Because the buyer says, "Hey, Andrew, look, we've got a great relationship. That I'm measured on X number of demos per year, or with the brand. Can you throw some demos my way?" And you're saying, "Sure." But you're going to make sure it happens in a way that really it checks the box for that category manager, that BDM if it's HEB, but it also makes sure that the store is going to do better and your brand will thrive because you're putting the appropriate effort in, so that the consumer sees it enough times, potentially puts it in his or her cart, and it's part of their pantry, becomes part of their routine.
Yeah. One of the other things that's interesting is that some consumers are hesitant to lean into new products because some retailers aren't as good from an execution standpoint about making sure product stays in stock, especially when it's new. So if you have 15 stores that you're going to have demos, let's say every 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to do 3 demos, it's much easier to get a distro from corporate and override the local store's ordering process to be able to send enough product into that store
Nice.
because they know that they're going to be able to sell it now. Because why do some brands succeed where others don't? When sometimes the brands that succeed are subpar brands, they're owned by some of the big conglomerates, right? It's because they have huge case stacks out in front and they made a big display and they've got this presence. So now consumers are sitting there saying, even though this seltzer is like every other seltzer that's out there, it's front and center and they've spent a lot of money to be there. I know that I can go buy that, and I know that when I come back here in 3 weeks, it's going to be here. Not saying you have to do a huge setup or
Right.
whatever it is. You just at least have to be present.
Right. Yeah. Right. No, that
And
perception, that's good.
so gaining that perception that you're not going anywhere and that you're here to stay is going to help from a sustained sales lift standpoint. Your ROI the day of the event rarely happens unless you're a very, $1, $2, $3 item. You get over a $5 item and really up to 20, it becomes harder, and it becomes even harder when you get above that number, especially when we're talking adult beverage or whatever, or some of the really niche natural specialty items, right? So the way to do that is to make sure that people know that you're going to be there. They're comfortable that they're going to add that into sort of their routine. And then really looking at the sustained sales lift over a 4-week period after that ends. That's going to kind of tell you what your ROI is. That's what's going to tell you what the KPIs are. Nice. And then it really depends on, is the retailer sharing sales data with you?
Right.
Or is that a nuclear secret?
Some retailers is, right? Others are a little more forthcoming. Well, those are all really good things. So for folks that are listening or clearly picked up some value added items, if you don't follow Samplers Inc. on LinkedIn and all their various social platforms, you should, because you will learn things. Andrew and his team give away value. And just like some of the others we've interviewed that do Amazon agencies, I like to connect with folks who are sharing that value. So even if you're not using them now, or you've got the idea for your future CPG item, you're on LinkedIn, these are great. Andrew and his team are great to follow. Their company, Samplers Inc., are great to follow. And my experience has been too that even if they're happy with their current agency that they may be using, Andrew's great. Him and his team are great to talk to. One, he's already shared that they don't look to cannibalize others or harm them, but to just have the relationship, because maybe your brand really grows and you need to activate more retailers than your current, even well-run agency can, because that can happen. And you've mentioned to me before, like, Bryan, there's these companies that are also large, but they're, you're doing Walmart and Target, just thousands of like numbers that we'd all be excited about. But it's so significant that you could use some secondary support. Andrew's team is very capable of that. So it's one of those that in a brand, if you make some sort of CPG item, at some point your brand will have a secondary co-packer. You might be the primary manufacturer. I think brands that are wise, they'll at least have one in their back pocket in case there's some strange weather issue. There's, again, Sam's and Costco both need hundreds of truckloads at once. You have that backup manufacturing capacity. It's very wise to have the same in your activation, your sampling. So Andrew is really good to know for those things as well. So you might be happy with your team, get to know them, because you might have that ramp up that you need, or just Andrew's connections in the industry for merchandising, all those other support things. You're a person who makes connections as well. So I encourage folks that listen, connect with Andrew and his team. I appreciate your friendship, and I've learned things from you. You've connected me with people, and it's really great to count you as a friend in the industry. And I look forward to seeing more of those amazing samplers videos. When I get professional like mine, I'm gonna get rid of that shiny spot on my head. They'll start to look like those beautiful samplers videos. But thank you again, Andrew, for taking time. I appreciate it, sir.
I appreciate you, buddy. Thank you very much.